Good morning, members of the press, and welcome to this morning's press conference, Pncr press conference, with our leader, Comrade C. Norton. Please allow me to introduce our panel. To my far right is the Honorable Member of Parliament, Vince Roy Jordan, and our Vice Chair of the Pncr. To his left is no other than our leader, Comrade Aubrey C. Norton. And to his left is the Honorable Mayor, Aubrey Norton-Fri. That, of course, yours truly, the Chairman of the Pncr, Sherwin Holder. This morning, the press statement will be read by Comrade Norton, the leader of the Pncr, and other parts of that statement will be read by others on the panel. So, Comrade Norton, please go ahead.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. COVID-19 spike, a result of government's incompetence. The twin evils of the increase in cases of the coronavirus and the rising prices of almost every item in Guyana, which was so evident in 2021, segued easily into 2022. Principally as a result of the laxation and lax enforcement of COVID-19 measures during the festive seasons. The first 2 weeks of 2022 have seen a massive spike in the daily reported cases. As at Wednesday of this week, nearly 8,000 persons have been reported to be suffering from some variant of COVID-19. 20 persons have died for the year, while 13 were in the ICU. This is clearly a case of government incompetence and recklessness, having permitted super spreader events during the festive season. The cost of living is killing Guyanese. Against the backdrop of a booming oil industry, with 2 additional discoveries announced in January, that has put the estimated recoverable barrels of oil closer to 11 billion, a meager 7% increase in the minimum wage, the cost of living of everyday items in Guyana has increased by an estimated 20% over last year, sparking fears that Guyana is already suffering from the dreaded resource curse, also known as the paradox of plenty. It is the failure of the country to benefit from its natural resource wealth and the failure of the government to respond effectively to public welfare needs instead of reaping the benefits of much anticipated economic transformation. To illustrate this phenomenon, in a letter written by Imtiaz Bacchus, who was relaying the consternation of his wife while both of them were shopping, it is noted in the Stabrook News of January 13 as follows. Compared to 6 months ago, the prices of some items have risen by as much as $1,000. For example, rice was $2,600 for a 5-gallon bag. It is now $3,600. Cooking oil was $2,000 for a 5-liter bottle. It is now $3,300. Milk powder was $800 per pound. It is now $1,260. Flour, sugar, peas, potatoes, garlic, onion, and all pasta products have risen between $200 to $300. The prices of snapper, mullet, bangameri, butterfish, and catfish have risen by as much as $800 to $1,200. To this select list, we could add staples such as bread, which price has shot up from $2.75 per loaf to $4.75 a loaf. Plantain, which sold for $100 per pound, now being retailed for $300 per pound. And our beloved fish and chips, which is now $1,400 per reduced box compared to $1,100 for a bigger box. Cost of living is rising and killing the poor man. Clearly, the government continues to mismanage the economy and appears to be clueless about what to do. From the ad hoc handouts of cash to promises of marine cage culture to replace the livelihood of our fisher folks who have lost access to their catchment areas while experiencing dwindling fish catch, this government has shown no care for or interest in the poor. With the World Bank projecting real growth of 49.7% in 2022, and with the government expected to raid the Natural Resource Fund of the entire sum of US $607 million or Guyana 122 billion under the disputed and highly contentious NRF Act of 2021, the PNC calls upon the government to craft a budget in 2022 that will bring relief to the Guyanese people and transform their lives in a meaningful way. This third budget of the PPP since their coming to power on fraudulent votes on August 2nd, 2020, must be people-centered instead of the continued pandering to an elite section of the private sector. We therefore call on the government to include in the 2022 budget the following: an increase in the income tax threshold to 1.5 million or 1/3 of gross earnings, whichever is higher, from the present $780,000. Change in the income tax law to ensure the minimum wage is never taxed. Restructuring of the income tax rates as follows: the first $3 million of chargeable income, 15%. The next $3 million, 20%, and the balance, 25%. An interim increase in wages and salaries of public servants of 10%, pending the start and finalization of government union talks on wages and other benefit for workers. At the end of the day, workers must get at least 25% in wages and salary increases. An increase of $10,000 per month on the old age pension and the grant given to those in difficult circumstances. The payment of a COVID risk allowance to all eligible frontline workers of $50,000 every 6 months until the COVID pandemic has been declared officially over by WHO, PHO. A grant of up to $5 million to eligible existing micro, small, and medium businesses as well as startups. Set aside about $5 billion to implement a program of infrastructure renewal in depressed villages and communities, entailing roads, drains, community and recreational centers, markets, etc. An earmarked sum of money to conduct an immediate survey of poverty in the entire country so as to better target ameliorative policies and measures. It is estimated that between 2018 and 2020, it is estimated that between 2018 and 2020, $6 billion was spent on the importation of carrots, broccoli, cauliflower, and cauliflower. This is tragic, given the agricultural potential of the country and the resilience of our farmers. We therefore call for an immediate reversal of this trend. Programs such as Rural Agriculture Infrastructure Development RAID, which was implemented under the coalition government to develop sustainable farming in Buxton, Bedford-Walton, Mocha and Ithaca, must be revitalized and expanded to other villages with necessary government support in the form of financing, extension services, marketing and sales. We support the Commissioner General of the GRA call for a review of all tax exemptions granted for a switch from tax exemptions to tax credits. This method will plug the widespread abuse of tax exemption while garnering additional domestic revenues.
Thank you, Comrade Leader. I will now invite the Honorable Mayor to make a statement on the cleanup exercise in Georgetown and elsewhere. Go ahead, Comrade Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recently announced cleanup exercise in Georgetown and its environs by the PPP government and PSC on Holy Alliance expose yet again the integrated bad intentions of the PPP. Firstly, the exercise demonstrates the PPP continued efforts to undercut and ignore the local government councils in our towns and villages. These efforts fly in the face of the legitimate expectation of citizens and the Guyana Constitution itself. Our Constitution specifically states in Article 71(1) that local government is a vital aspect of our democracy and shall be organized so as to involve as many people as possible in the task of managing and developing the communities in which they live. In line with the constitutional obligation, it bears repeating the APNU-AFC coalition government finalized amendments to the local government legislation and returned local elections to Guyana in 2016 and 2018. In contrast, the attitude of the PPP towards Georgetown Mayor and City Council and other local councils led by the opposition is to stifle them of financial and other resources. In addition, the government bypasses these local authorities and its political intervention in their functions. Take Georgetown for an example. It is public knowledge that the City Council is to quote Starbreak News editorial of January 13. Unable to manage solid waste disposal because Georgetown has become far too large, both in terms of size, wards have been added and boundaries extended, and population and its revenue collection has remained too much. The PPPC continues to exploit their reality for pure political motives, regardless of the damage of the city's infrastructure, physical environment, and its aesthetic, and regardless of discomfort and harm to the city residents. The PNCR calls on government to respect the authority and mandates of the elected local government councils and to provide them with the adequate funding and other resources. The second aspect, of the cleanup exercise that the PNCR wishes to highlight is the use of the joint services to provide manpower and other resources. In Guyana context, we see this as an unwarranted misuse of the joint services. For such labor intervention exercise, a government that is generally interested in providing employment and income for the ordinary folks should instead hire residents and small informal co-ops to undertake all works. This approach also ensures that a permanent and competent workforce is established to conduct such exercise on a routine basis. It is also important to note that while crime is on the rise, the PPPC is utilizing policemen and soldiers to clean up the city at the expense of them fighting crime to enforcing the law, which are their legitimate functions. Clearly, the PPPC has no interest in local democracy and democracy generally. They seem hell-bent to undermining the APNU AFC control councils so that they can remove them and appoint interim management committees. This will not work. The government needs to ensure that local democratic organs are allowed to serve the people who elected them or elect them. To register the party rejection of the PSC, which is the Private Sector Commission and Government of Guyana exercise, we are calling on the APNU-led local councils in towns and villages to withhold their support. To do otherwise would be encouraging the PPP to further disrespect and undermine their authority and mandates.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. I will now ask MP Vince Roy Jordan, Vice Chair of the PNCR, to make his statement on the MMA ADA issue, after which we will allow you, the media, to post your questions. Go ahead, Comrade.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Good morning to the ladies and gentlemen of the media. MMA's bullyism on proprietors' private cultivation land. The PPPC regime must desist from bullying the legal owners of the lands in the villages of Prophet, Fowles, El Dorado, Belladrum, Paradise, and Golden Fleece, where they are seeking to build a canal and must engage villagers if they want to use their transported lands to construct a new canal. These proprietors have the right to decide whether they will facilitate the construction of the canal on their lands. No action should be taken without meaningful consultation and mutual agreement, which must include adequate compensation negotiated by the stakeholders. The PNCR condemns the PPPC attempt to utilize residents' transported lands without their consent. This project is intended to construct a new drainage canal passing through the bona fide transported rice cultivation lands of the proprietors of the aforementioned communities. This will result in each proprietor losing significant portions of their lands to accommodate the canal and dams on both sides, along with shoulder drains. The MMA ADA claims that the project was conceptualized some 7 years ago. Based on this claim, they proceeded to do works on the people's land. This is unacceptable. The PNCR therefore support the proprietors who vigorously objected to their project and stopped machines from working. It must be made very clear that a project intended by the MMA ADA will benefit not one of the proprietors and is aimed at draining 8,000 acres of rice lands south of the main canal, which are all controlled by the said state entity. At a time when government is claiming that it is promoting agriculture, it proposes a project that will result in the disadvantaging of the poor and average Guyanese engaging in rice cultivation along the villages of Profit to Golden Fleece. This project will put these proprietors' agricultural land at risk since there can be excessive flooding with the volume of water intended to be drained by this channel. And should there be any prolonged or unusual tide, excessive rain or overtopping of the Abari Creek, these proprietors will be adversely affected. Further, to start works on the grounds of these proprietors without the common courtesy of informing them, but rather just barging into their property is gross disrespect and a reflection of the PPPC regime disregard for the people who own the lands in the villages. The People's National Congress Reform strongly condemns this irrational act by the MMA-ADA and urges that they immediately go into full consultation with all proprietors and desist from bullying these proprietors. The MMA-ADA was developed by the former President Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham to mainly bring aid and proper management of all state land within Region 5 and not to deprive and frustrate citizens. At a recent meeting with proprietors and representatives of MMA-ADA, it was recommended that the project be placed on hold and all proprietors be properly consulted with, and that it is done very carefully and with high degree of urgency. The following are recommended. The proprietors must be written to explaining the nature of the project. They must be given a clear calculation of how much lands they stand to lose at the expense of this project. They must be allowed the opportunity to meet on the ground, physically to examine the proposed project. Finally, they must be given the right to decide on the way forward since the lands belong to the proprietors. Leaders meeting with the diplomatic community. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform met with the Commonwealth Secretary General Honorable Patricia Scotland, QC, on Tuesday, 11 January, and with the United States Ambassador to Guyana, Mrs. Sarah Ann Lynch, on Wednesday, 12 January at Congress Place, Sophia. Both meetings were very cordial, and the PNCR raised the issue of the lack of good governance in Guyana in the case of the meeting with the U.S. Ambassador, where the U.S. Ambassador underscored the dangers posed by the re-emergence of drugs and drug trafficking in our society. It was also pointed out that Guyana has returned to a society of lawlessness and corruption, among other social ills. Condolences on the passing of Mr. Gordon Calendar. The PNCR wishes to express condolences to the family, relatives, and friends of Mr. Gordon Calendar, also known as Bad Heart, who passed away early this morning at his home in Linden. Mr. Calendar was a RDC councillor and a long-standing member of the People's National Congress Reform. He will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. We'll now entertain questions from the media. The floor is now open for questions from the media.
What's happening?
Are they hearing us? Members of the media, you can now post your questions.
You're not mute by any chance.
Members of the media, you can go ahead. You seem to be having a slight technical difficulty.
Yes, you mean they hearing you?
If you can hear us, you can, and you wish to post a question, you can indicate by a raise of hand. You can do so by raising your hand so that we can identify you. I see Mr. Demrar Waves. Is it Demrar Waves? Dennis Chebral. Please go ahead, sir.
It's an internal matter, and we will discuss it internally, and once we would have completed those discussions, I will inform the press in future. Extremely early. As I know, the PNCR and the AFC would have addressed those issues, and as far as I know, there are no problems. Well, I am not so sure what you're talking about, but what I do know is that I did engage with the leader of the AFC, and we dealt with all the issues that had to be dealt with. And I think the members of the Public Accounts Committee will do what they have to do in the quickest possible time. The members of the Public Accounts Committee do their work. Whoever is chosen will be known. we are not going to get involved in public pronouncements that will affect the discussions. The party has set out its position. We are guided. We will act in consonance, and at the right time, the press will know.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to pose the question to the panel or to Mr. Norton? I see another hand being raised. Who's it? Lokran? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Norton. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning. Yes, I'm hearing you.
Lake Carmichael from the Standard News. Outside of your statement, Mr. Norton, we know that the PNCR endorsed some of the electoral reform group's recommendations on the proposed amendment to ROPA. But we have not seen anything official from the PNCR as to what some of its recommendations are. Additionally, Minister Teixeira would have indicated that they received no official word from the party as well. So are we going to see any submission to the government on the proposals to ROPA amendment from the PNCR? If so, when can we expect those?
The People's National Congress reform is committed to discussing all issues and then taking positions on them. We are involved in discussions, and again, once the time is right, we will make the pronouncements. We haven't endorsed any group like you suggest. We said that we welcome their views. In that statement, it was said that they committed to dialogue, and we believe, though there are disagreements, we have disagreements, the fact that they have committed to dialogue, then that in itself is good. But we have not endorsed any group. We welcome their involvement and some of their positions. That's a totally different thing to endorse.
But just for clarity, discussions on the proposed amendments to ROPA are happening internally with the Central Executive Committee.
There are a number of persons, institutions that have to discuss, and those are ongoing. In the final analysis, everything comes to the Central Executive of the party. We sit down and we discuss it, and then we issue a clear statement.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Dennis, you had another question? I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Norton, has any approach been made to Mr. Ranger to discuss the question of their representative of the list, whether that should in fact be transferred to you or to someone else?
I didn't get a question clear.
I'm asking whether any approach has been made to Mr. Ranger about having the position of the representative of the list be transferred to you or to someone else, and if you have approached him, if the party has approached him, what has been the outcome so far?
The party has taken a position that these issues will be discussed internally, and once we deal with those issues, we will together say to the public what the situation is. You would agree that it is not in the best interest of a political party for the details of such issues to be in the public domain before we thoroughly discuss and agree.
Mr. Norton, how does this constrain, well, the two, that is representative of the list and you not being leader of the opposition? How do these two things in any way constrain or not constrain you in your political work as leader of the the largest party in the coalition and the largest opposition party in Guyana.
As you would recognize, our work is ongoing, and so I don't know what is constraining it, but to me, our work is going. It's going at the right pace, and we will continue to do our work. So I don't follow the logic in your question.
But to what extent would you agree that having the profile and the position of opposition leader would in fact enhance your work in the way that you're able to profile your work, your objectives, your positions in the public domain? To what extent would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know what you're asking me to agree to. I think I've been elected by the membership of the People's National Congress Reform. They're comfortable with the work I'm doing. I will continue to do the work. I'll be guided by the party leadership as we proceed into the future.
So then it doesn't really matter whether or not you get the position of opposition leader?
Well, I didn't say that, but if you arrive at that conclusion, feel free.
I'm asking you.
Well,
Does it matter?
If it is not an issue that I'm going to discuss in the public domain, if you arrive at that conclusion, feel free. It might not have logic, but it might satisfy you.
No, sir, I'm asking you the question.
And I have answered.
It's not my conclusions. It's a question we pose to you.
Well, the question and the conclusion seem to be mixed up. But there's nothing new I can say on the issue. I think I've given you all the information I am disposed to giving you on the matter.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Leader, and thank you, Dennis. We can have Mr. Kurt Campbell. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, I just wanted to know if you can give us a full update on those members who were co-opted to the Central Executive Committee since the last elections.
Well, I don't know what you mean by a full update. You mean give them you the names?
Yes, thank you.
Well, Sherwood Lowe was co-opted. Joanne Ramasindo was co-opted. Daniel C. Ram was co-opted. And Royce Dale Ford in the first meeting. Last evening, we co-opted from Region 7, specifically Bartica, Mr. Hulbert Knights. That is as far as the co-option goes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just got low on the first thing. On the first thing that you gave, I just got low. If you could just repeat the first.
Sherwood Lowe. You got low on it? I hope you're not punning. It's Sherwood Lowe. It's Sherwood Lowe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Dennis, I see your hand still raised. Do you have a follow-up?
Mr. Norton, in a statement yesterday, I believe, or the day before, one of the recommendations that was floated to deal with the rising cost of living is the introduction of price ceilings. Could you elaborate a bit more?
Introduction of what? Introduction of what?
Price ceilings.
Price
Ceilings.
I am not clear, but today's press statement outlines clearly our position on this high cost of living. I am not knowledgeable of us wanting any price ceiling, etc. If you're talking about price controls, they don't work. If you check the world, they don't work. I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but the People's National Congress Reform is not interested in price controls. We're interested in government taking proper measures to reduce the cost of living.
Thank you. Mr. Kurt Campbell, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a follow-up?
No, sorry.
Okay, is there any other member of the press that has any questions? Is there anyone else? Okay, if there are no questions, at this time I would like to express sincere condolences to the children, siblings, and relatives and friends of Miss Kathleen Armstrong, JPCOA. She was regional counselor, RDC counselor for region number 3, and she passed on the 8th of January 2022. So condolences are expressed to her relatives, friends, siblings, and her entire family on behalf of myself and the PNCR. If there are no other questions by the media, I would like to say thank you for your participation this morning in our press conference, and I do hope that you have a good day.
Yep.